Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Typical Skeptic podcast. Welcome to everybody that's watching live on YouTube and live on Rumble and also live on Facebook. I have an amazing guest with me today. This has been planned out for a couple months. I've been wanting to pick Jerry's brain about this subject because I saw him on other podcasts like Ryder Lee's podcast, and I thought the information that he was bringing forward was just so crucial as far as like people with mental health issues. Like, so it's like it's very important that we get this information out. And who my guest is Jerry Marzinsky. Jerry is a retired licensed psychotherapist with 40 years experience working with and studying the thought processes of psychotic and criminally insane patients in some of the most volatile psychiatric institutions of the nation. Jerry is a commercial pilot, certified scuba diver, and longtime distance motorcyclist. He has held positions at second lieutenant in the Arizona Civil Air Patrol and assistant scoutmaster. He was awarded the State of Arizona's Meritorious Service Award and Pima College of Apple Award of Teaching Abnormal Psychology. His formal academic training comprises a BA in psychology from Temple University, that's Philadelphia, a master's degree in counseling from the University of Georgia, and 2 years study in a PhD psychology program. He is the co-author of an amazing journey into the psychotic mind, breaking the spell of the ivory tower, and is currently has a private practice in Arizona. And you can find more about Jerry at his website. It's www.jerrymarzinsky.com. That's Jerry and then marzinsky.com. And then you can also get his book, The Amazing Journey into the Psychotic Mind. I have the link, the Amazon link, in the description. And I'd like to give him a big warm welcome to the show. Jerry, thank you for coming on for the first time. How are you?
I'm good.
Yeah.
Looking forward to talking to you.
Yeah, this is going to be really interesting. Like I said, I've been following your work for a while. I saw you on Ryder Lee's podcast, and I thought that show that you did with him and that young man who was in prison for a long time, but he didn't beat the system, but he showed all the faults that were in the mental health prison system. Do you remember that episode? And if I was going to say your thoughts on it, like before we get started into your background stuff.
Which was it? That the one with the Boston? With Boston?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. Yeah.
He used to be a meth addict.
Yes, that was it. Yes, that was it. That was amazing.
Yeah, it shows you, an inside look at what some of these state institutions are like.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's not really a spiritual component, but let me get into this. So, for my fans that might not know, you have a theory, and I think it's not just a theory. I think it's pretty solid that the mental voices that people hear that are schizophrenic, or even the negative thoughts that come into people's head, is kind of pushed by entities. Is that correct?
Yeah, and I don't believe it's a theory. I've spent close to 4 decades working with schizophrenics, and in virtually every type of mental institution in the United States. I've worked in private psychiatric hospitals, state psychiatric hospitals, the psychology department of a large prison. I've done psych crisis for the last 10 years while I was employed in various large hospitals around town. I've worked in all of them, and the voices were consistent across time and space. They ran repeatable, predictable patterns, and the psychiatric mafia insists that they are auditory hallucinations, but they haven't done a single study on them. They just, like the high priest of ancient Egypt, they just go, "We hereby pronounce and declare that the voices schizophrenics hear are auditory hallucinations. They're not real. They're very real, and they run repeatable, predictable patterns. And if they're running repeatable, predictable patterns, they can't be hallucinations because hallucinations don't run patterns."
Yeah. When you say pattern, should I maybe I should share the article. When you say patterns, like what kind of patterns do you think they're running, and like who do you think these entities are? If you had to say, like if you narrowed it down,
Well, they're demonic. You might call them the archons. They're mental parasites. They feed off of negative emotional energy.
yeah,
And one of the
and that
first
that so that's yeah,
one of the first patterns I saw when I was working at the big psychiatric hospital was that they're consistently negative. You know, they're very seldom positive, and if they
yeah,
are, it's only to get the victim's trust until they get their claws in them. But you know, one of the most common consistent traits of these schizophrenic voices is they're consistently negative. They're derogatory, they're insulting, they're abusive, they're destructive. Um, they may play like they're helpers for a short period of time, but they'll eventually turn on the victim once they gain their trust, and then they'll begin attacking them. So there's
yeah. I
23
pulled up
patterns.
your article. I shared it. What I was going to say, we have a. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, we've identified 23 different patterns that these things run. So this is the operational definition of the psychotic voices. All right. This is how they react. So, you know, it's these are energetic entities. They're not physical. You know, so they're kind of like a magnetic field. I mean, you can't see them, you can't hear them. The schizophrenics can hear them, but the normal person can't. You know, you can't touch them, you can't feel them. So, you know, if if they're kind of the similarity between them and a magnetic field. Okay, the magnetic field you can't sense it with your senses. You can't feel it, you can't touch it, you can't taste it, um, it but it's there. Okay, now if you got a bottle of iron filings and you put it over that magnetic field, you could now see the shape of that magnetic field. Okay? That's exactly what these patterns are. This is the iron filings for these negative demonic entities. This is how they react. This is their operational definition. Okay. So, you know, they're negative, they're anti religious, they foster negative emotion, they energetically drain their victims, they get louder off their sunset, they get louder when ignored, they foster self destructive behavior, they foster isolation, they demand the attention of their victims. They maneuver for increased control over the victim. They gaslight. They manipulate perception. They have complete access to the schizophrenic's memory. They demand the victim not to tell anybody about them. Um, they're consummate liars. They lie about everything. They consistently steer their victim away from anything that might generate joy. They manipulate feeling without speaking. They short circuit reason. They try to pass themselves off as thoughts belonging to the victim. They foster selective forgetting. Uh, they fill their minds with negative thoughts about themselves and others. They destroy any vestige of positive self concept. And you can get all these things off my website at jerrymarzinsky.com. They're listed there. There's 23 of them.
Yeah, I was just going to go. Yeah, I'm going to go through them. So you named a couple of these, but negativity. So that seems like they're, and then you said anti-religious. They foster and create negative emotion and energetically drain victims. They get louder after sunset. That's an interesting one. Like what they tend to get louder, or they're attacking the victim more in the nighttime. You found?
Oh yeah, especially between 2 and 3 in the morning. That's their favorite time to attack. And what they usually do is they instill nightmares in the schizophrenics, which wakes them up, and then right away they start into them. They start hammering them. You're no good. You're rotten. You're stupid. You're ugly. Nobody likes you. Yeah, every rotten thing that they can think of.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, I have a little bit of like experience with this. I'm not schizophrenic to where I hear like auditory voices, but I get negative thoughts in in my own head. Like like
Yeah.
negative, and then I was at the point where I emailed you this earlier. I remember like going to sleep at night, and I felt like something was implanting memories in my head at night. Now, I also cover like targeted individuals and stuff like that. And I've looked into, maybe I might have been a targeted individual, but like I don't know how you can tell like if it's entities or if it's a targeted individual. Like, I'm not quite sure. Like, have you looked into that? And like, I know you said you didn't look a lot into V2K, but like, have you ever looked into like some of the claims people make from targeting and like what and the is versus like the entity attachments and stuff?
No, I've never talked to a targeted individual. I've spoken to a couple that went through that. What is it? That CIA program where they brainwash people. Um, MK Ultra, I
MK
think it was.
Ultra.
Yeah, yeah. But I've never spoken to a targeted individual where the voice to skull content. But these patterns are the ones that are fostered by the negative entities. I don't know what the patterns are or what it's like this voice to skull content. I imagine it's somebody's broadcasting something to give them suggestions. Okay? I don't know if,
Yeah.
and one of the things I'm kind of concerned about is that once MK Ultra gets hold of this list, that they would then use it, to mimic schizophrenia. So I'm just hoping that
Yeah, that would make
it
sense,
goes to
right?
a good cause. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Um, I'll keep going through the.
this latter after sunset.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
When I was working psych in these geriatric homes, they had something called sundowner syndrome. So that was these people would get increasingly psychotic after sunset. They called it sundowner syndrome. They would begin acting out. They'd been attacking staff. They'd attack each other. They would get unruly and uncontrollable when the sun went down. But the voices get
Wow.
louder after
Um,
sunset. They get louder when ignored.
yeah,
So,
it says, and it also.
I've been with numbers of psychiatrists who tell their patients, oh, they're hallucinations, just ignore them. They won't be ignored. When I pulled those people back in, I said, how'd that go for you? They said it didn't work at all. They get louder if they're ignored. They refuse to be ignored.
Wow. And they foster. This is one that I find interesting, and this is we could go into a whole topic about. They foster self-destructive behavior. This could be a plan, I feel, by entities to bring the downfall of humanity. Because think about it: if they have someone who's schizophrenic, who's isolated, who doesn't get much contact with the outside world, they might feel like they don't have a lot of friends, and they're not doing anything with their life. They're not progressing. They're not out uh, dating women or having kids or having a fun, productive life, right? So these entities you could say they trap their victims to where they keep them isolated, and then that fosters an unproductive life, right? And not just an unproductive life, but then a dangerous life, because then they might start committing dangerous acts, like they might rob a bank or anything. You know what I mean? Do you kind of agree with what I just said?
Oh yes, certainly. They don't want their victim to be around anybody. They consider parents, schizophrenic kids consider the voices consider their parents enemies. Anybody who tries to help them is an enemy. They want their victim locked in a bedroom by themselves, not interacting with anybody, and just paying attention to them. Boredom is the worst thing that could happen to a schizophrenic because the voices kind of take over. Um, I remember one prisoner I worked with. We worked for 6 months to get rid of the voices, and when they finally left, he said the silence was deafening. You know, I checked on him a few months later, and he was so lonely. He had such poor social skills that he asked for them to come back, and they returned. So he'll have them for the rest of his life now.
Wow. Well,
So
what I was going
one
to say while we go through the list. Sorry, go ahead.
one thing I want you to notice with this list, there's a one-to-one correlation virtually between this list with regard to the description of the voices, the psychotic voices that schizophrenics hear, and what's coming over the mainstream media right now, just pummeling all of us. It's this. They will not be ignored. They're fostering self-destructive behavior, isolate, be afraid, panic. You're on the verge of nuclear war. I mean, it's almost the same stuff. What's happening in our governments, in the Western governments right now, matches this list almost completely. During COVID, they wanted you to isolate yourself, stay away from everybody.
Yeah, I
Don't,
agree.
don't talk to anybody. Don't see your relatives. Don't go out for dinner.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm going to keep going through the list here. They maneuver for increased control of the victims. Have you saw this a lot where if the voices aren't getting attention, that they will like start to increase their efforts to make the
Yeah.
person more crazy or more uncontrollable?
Yes, they'll start screaming and yelling, and they're just very persistent. They will just demand their attention. They will not be ignored. And when psychiatry tells them, oh yeah, they're hallucinations, just ignore them. That's stupid advice. If they would ever ask their patients what happens when they ignore the voices, they'd find out that they can't be ignored. And these medications that psychiatry gives these people does not get rid of the voices for the most part. Very seldom do they get rid of the voices. It's like pouring Thorazine on a magnetic field. These voices are energetic. All psychiatry is doing is dumbing down the brain.
Yeah, I was going to ask you this. I think this is a good question. Do you think the entities have control over the person's life besides the mental field? Like, for example, like if the entities tell the victim that if they don't do something, something bad's going to happen to them, and then say the victim doesn't do something and something bad happens. Like, have you seen that a lot? Like, where they're actually able to manipulate the person's reality, or is it all in the mental sphere?
No, they have a certain control over other people. I remember one schizophrenic I was working with in the prison where the voices told him, "Watch out for this other prisoner because he's going to assault you." A couple of days later, he was in the bathroom after he took a shower and he was combing his hair back and whipping the water out of his hair. Just then, this other guy that the voices warned him about walked into the bathroom and got hit in the face with the water that this guy was slinging back, and that guy attacked him. Um, I've seen him manipulate other people to attack the victim, or to scare them, or to manipulate circumstances. So um, they do have control over other people around the schizophrenic to a certain degree.
That's interesting. And then when you say the number 11 is gaslighting, what do you mean by that? Like, how are they gaslighting? What are some examples if you had to say?
Well, the first one that comes up is a fellow that the voices were telling him that he murdered somebody, and he was so far out that he didn't know whether he had done that or not. So, he considered going to the police and turning himself in. But if he didn't murder anybody, then they would know he was nuts, and they might send him to a psychiatrist or to a hospital, and then they put him on more drugs. Okay, now, so he didn't go to the police, but every time that a siren or a police siren or an ambulance came by, the voices would tell him they're looking for you. They're coming to get you. So he couldn't win either way. So every time he heard a police siren
Wow.
or an ambulance, he would get paranoid, and they would start into him. They're coming for you. Here they are. They're looking for you. You better go hide somewhere because they're coming.
Like what? What? I was gonna say, like, what all you spent 40 years working in the mental health field, so you've seen a lot of this, right? So your decision doesn't come with like lack of by any lack of knowledge. Like you've just spent, like I said, a lot of time in this field, like basically studying these patients, right? And could you talk about that a little bit?
Well, I've spoken to hundreds of schizophrenics, and I've spoken to their voices. I would speak to their voices through them. They would tell me what the voices were saying. And while I was in the prison, okay, in the state hospital there was an unwritten rule. Okay, I worked at one of the biggest psychiatric hospitals on the planet for 7 years when I first got out of graduate school. And there was an unwritten rule there that you don't um, upset schizophrenic patients or psychotic patients because they were attacking psychiatry at a rate beyond. Uh, and it was only psychiatrists that they were attacking. They weren't attacking psychiatric nurses or doctors or dentists or regular nurses, or the attack rate on psychiatrists was almost as prevalent as it was with attendants who worked with them 24 hours a day. I couldn't figure that out. It took me 7 years to find out what was going on there. Um, and I was kind of wondering, well,
What was it?
okay, I'll tell you. So I was wondering, what are these psychiatrists saying to these patients in 15 or 20 minutes? They only see them like, once a month or once every 2 months in the state hospital. What are they saying to them that it's triggering them to attack them um, at that rate? I mean, they were it was pretty consistent that they were getting attacked. They were getting assaulted. Um, After 7 years, there was one gal was working for the Department of Vocational Rehabilitation in one of their psychiatric rehab centers, and we were training um, high level schizophrenics in a vocation, so they could leave and they could work and earn somewhat of a living. And there was one gal who was in the cosmetology class. She was doing well. She was hearing voices. She was taking her meds. And as long as she was on her meds, she did fine. She got good grades in class. She behaved herself, but she kept going off the meds. And the meds are awful. The side effects to those drugs are just friggin' awful. Um, they're not abusable drugs. Nobody would take them for recreation. They're just terrible drugs. They're toxic. With long
Yeah.
term use, they're toxic. They actually shrink your brain. They destroy your peripheral nervous system. Of course, psychiatry doesn't tell that to the patients. Um, so she quit taking her drugs for a third time, and that was the final time where if they went off their drugs a third time, we reasoned that if they won't stay on their drugs in the psych rehab center where they're being handed to them every day, they're certainly not going to take them on their own when they get out. So what we would do would discharge them and take in another client that we thought might be more consistent or consistent with their drugs or compliant with their drugs, um, and train them. So when I told this gal, okay, that was the third time you went off your drugs, we're going to discharge you. She told her mother, and her mother freaked out and said, you know, listen, I can't deal with her here. I'll drive up there. And she was quite a distance off. She says, I'll drive up there and we'll talk to her together to find out why she went off her drugs and see what we could do about keeping her on the drugs. I felt sorry for the mother because I knew what she was going to. So I said, oh, okay. Set up a meeting for one Friday afternoon. She showed up. The client came into the office, and both the mother and I are sitting there going, tell us, why did you go off your drugs a third time? You knew you were going to be discharged if you did that. At that time, we didn't have anything else. We didn't know of any other way to treat schizophrenics other than with drugs. And that's what we were told was that was the only thing that worked with them. Now, regular counseling, forget it. It's like shooting a rhino in the butt with a BB gun. It doesn't work with schizophrenics. Reasoning
Yeah.
doesn't work with schizophrenics. Um, so the mother and I were sitting there, saying, why? Why did you go off your meds a third time? And she said, well, you wouldn't believe me. And I told her, well, try me. I've been here for 7 years. I don't think there's anything you can tell me that's going to shock me. And she says, okay. She said, the voices told me that the medication psychiatry was giving me were poison, and that the psychiatrist was poisoning me. So that's why I went off them. And they pointed to the side effects of these nasty medicines to prove that they were toxic. So that was virtually true. Those psychiatric medications were toxic. They had those negative,
But here's the
awful.
thing: why would entities give? Why would the entities want to give the patient that kind of information? Is it to gain trust so they can have complete takeover of their brain or whatever? Or you
Well,
think you know what I'm trying to say?
partly,
Is that
yeah, partly they don't want them on those medications because those medications calm them down. They're basically major tranquilizers. Yeah, they don't want them calm. They want them upset. They want them nervous. They're feeding off the negative emotional energy that they generate from putting all these lies in their mind. They could care less about the patient. What they want is that negative emotional energy, or what's called loosh. That's what they feed off of. So they're
yeah?
parasites.
Robert Monroe called it loosh. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's amazing that yeah, I agree. I agree. Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah. So let me ask you this: as we're going through this list, what have you found a way, like an alternative way to get past this? Like, is there any hope for people that have schizophrenia? Like, would you say, like, or what,
Oh yeah.
or
Oh yeah.
let's just say, let's not even say schizophrenia.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
establishment doesn't want you to believe that you can recover from schizophrenia. But I've had a number of people who have. They have to work hard at it, and there's a new energetic therapy that is just breaking free right now called the MACE energy method, which deals with energetic entities and negative identities. So these voices are energy. Your thoughts are energy, your feelings are energy, your memory is energy. It's all energy. It's not physical. So psychiatry pouring these toxic drugs on your brain doesn't get rid of these things. It's like pouring thorazine on a magnetic field and expecting it to dissipate. It doesn't go anywhere. You may gum it up, you may weaken it, but it's not going to get rid of it. And for the most part, these voices don't leave when people are given these antipsychotic medications. All it does is calms them down and kind of turns them into, you know, semi zombies. Now, the voices don't want these patients taking those medications because they don't want them calm. They want them upset. They want them generating loose. They want them generating negative emotional energy, which they feed off of. So they will put any thought in the patient's mind that will upset them. They will tell any lie that will upset them. They call them ideas of reference in psychology. They will tell them that people laughing or laughing at them, you know, that stuff that's happening around them is associated with them. Um, they will do anything they can to upset the patient. They love it if they get thrown into a prison, because a prison is a consistently negative environment. That's a hog's trough for them. The prisons are a hog trough for these negative entities. They run the prisons.
wow, that's interesting. So, yeah, I was going to say, so do you think these entities come from like another dimension, like that or do you think they're just outside our perception? It seems like we have like a very limited perception. Do you think they might be beside us and we don't even know it, or do you feel
Oh
like
yeah.
they're acting like this from another dimension? Yeah, you guys.
Well, they are from they're they're in the energetic universe. Okay. So they conform to the laws of energy. There is no time, there is no space, there is no matter where they are. Okay. That's the universe they live in. It's the same universe your spirit lives in. Okay. Your spirit is not physical. It's an energetic entity, you know. And people who have out of the body experiences, their spirit is leaving their body, you know. And they can see these
So
entities. These
I got a
entities are
question.
around us all the time.
So they're existing like in the astral, you would say, or like in the yeah, in the
Yeah,
energetic field. Right?
right,
Yeah, like
right.
that, that's interesting. Something interesting I wanted to point out here was number 18. The voices can manipulate feeling without speaking. It says the
What they
voices
do
can
is
move
they
the
they they
victim feel
attack.
bad without
They
any noticeable cause. It's
Right.
negative thinking. Have you
Oh yeah, yeah. It's happened to me a number of times. You're sitting there minding your own business. These things attach to the back of your neck, right at the base of your skull, and then they start injecting a negative feeling. So you start feeling bad for no reason. I mean, nothing's going wrong in your universe. Everything's okay, and then you just start feeling bad for no apparent reason. That's them. If they can get you to feel bad for no apparent reason, then you start thinking bad, you start thinking negative, and then you start acting negative. And then you generate that negative emotional energy that they're after.
Wow. And then the number 19 is short circuiting a reason. The voices short circuit reason by urging a negative knee jerk reaction to perceived slights, often seriously damaging relationships. Um, so can you get into this? Like, can you say like a guy has a girlfriend and he thinks that the voices will tell the guy that his girlfriend's cheating on him, even though she's not. So he would act out on it because he's paranoid, and then that would kind of cause a splint in the relationship, and the entities would
That
get something off of that because they feed off that
Yes,
negative energy. Is that kind of
and
what that
and,
means?
and that's a very common thing that they do. They can't stand relationships, people in relationships. They want to break up families, they want to break up marriages, they want to break up relationships. And that's one of the most common things they do to a schizophrenic is and not a lot of people. They will tell them that their mate or their husband or their wife is cheating on them, you know, and they'll put that thought into their head even though they're not. And it causes a lot of conflict, it causes a lot of mistrust. You know? So they'll tell them uh, the husband that they'll do anything they can to break up relationships. They absolutely can't stand children. You know, they are very dangerous to children. So you look at what's happening right now with the United States being one of the biggest child and human traffickers on the planet right now. Where are those tens of thousands of children that are crossing the border? Where are they going? They have no idea. They're being
That's
destroyed.
a good point. That's a really good point. That's a
And the
really
government
good
is
point. I
complicit.
never thought of that. By the way,
The US
I
government is
think
complicit.
we have a little bit of a delay. Yeah, I agree. So I think I need someone to say. I think we have a little bit of a delay. I don't know. It could be entities. Like because it seems like when I say like my I don't know. I think there's a delay, but I'll just keep. But sorry, but yeah, no. It's a huge problem. It's an enormous problem. The human trafficking thing. And and you're saying you think these entities are behind that? But what if you had to guess?
Oh, sure. Look at what's happening in the government right now. They're letting millions of these people in. They have no idea who they are. Half of them coming in are Chinese of military age. You've got people coming in who've got mumps and measles and tuberculosis and whatever. They're just pouring across the border. Who's going to feed these people? They're sitting on the streets right now in Denver and San Diego and California, and they're just that nobody's taking care of them. They're turning to crime. The crime rate is astronomical. These people on the Democratic Party are crawling with these things, and some of the people in the Republican Party, the rhinos, are also crawling with these things. They're trying to destroy this country.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not very political, but like I would agree that there's that it seems like the government is infected with these entities. Like, can I ask you a question? Do you think that do you feel like there was a spike in entity activity at some point, like maybe after like the hippie era, or maybe out in the 90s or early 2000s, like um for example, from the time you started working in the psychiatric field, did you see a large increase of schizophrenia from then until now? And has
Yeah.
it gotten progressively worse? And
Yes, it has.
why do you think
It's
that's happening? Do you think that's just the entities just spreading their bullshit, or like, and they just figured they found out a way to manipulate humanity, so they're just gonna keep going with it?
Yep, yep. They're going to keep going with it. It's increasing every year. Right now, um, it's estimated there's 24 million schizophrenics worldwide, over 3 million in the United States alone, and it's increasing every single year. You know, you look at what's happening
Wow.
in the United States right now. Last year, almost 50,000 U.S. citizens killed themselves. They committed suicide. That's as many as died in the entire Vietnam War, and this is year after year after year. You got more psychiatrists, more psychologists, more psychiatric drugs on the planet now than have ever existed in the entire history of mankind. And look at what's happening. Between 2000 and 2018, suicide rates increased 37%. An estimated 24 veterans are killing themselves every day in the United States. From 2006 to 2016, the suicide rate increased 2% every year, with 1.4 million suicide attempts in 2017 and 47,000 deaths. 10,000 Americans are diagnosed with schizophrenics every year. So it's increasing. It's one of the top 10 health problems on the planet, according to the World Health Organization. And what is psychiatry and Big Pharma doing about it? They've cut research into the cause of schizophrenia down to virtually nothing. They do not want a cure for schizophrenia. Their funding is a dribble. What they want is to treat symptoms. They want to sell their drugs, and they're making a fortune on it. I think it's $7 billion a year in antipsychotic drugs, and more than $7 billion in antidepressant drugs. Neither one of those drugs are curing anything. And most of the 50,000 people, or a great number of them, who killed themselves last year were on antidepressant drugs or antipsychotic drugs. These drugs don't cure anything. Psychologists and psychiatrists don't cure anything. Now, there is that I was talking about the MACE energy system. This is a new system that come out that does cure psychological problems, and it cures them very quickly, and they don't return. It's an energetic therapy. It's nothing like regular psychotherapy. Matter of fact, the therapist doesn't even have to know what the trauma is in order to get rid of it.
Yeah,
It's
because
a
it
very
seems like.
interesting system.
Yeah. Well, I just wanted to say real quick, guys, like you guys we've heard so far what Jerry's had to say. He's made a lot of really good points and a lot of poignant information he said here. And if you have any questions, now's the time to ask. You can put your questions in the chat. I'll pick the best ones and, try to think of some good questions, and we'll keep the conversation going with some of your really good questions. Like I see we have about 50 people in the audience, so that's great, and that's not even counting the people that are watching on Rumble and Facebook or whatever too. So yeah, put your questions in the audience, and put your questions in the chat and we'll get them. Okay, so where was I going to go with that? I was going to say no. I think it's interesting what you said, Jerry, about the fact that the cases of schizophrenia have went up. This seems like it means we could basically just interchange the word schizophrenia for entity attachment. So it seems like more people are any entity attached now more than ever. But here's my question: why do you think more people now are entity attached more than ever?
Well, look at what's happening around us. You got an insane government that's brought us to the verge of a nuclear war. You've got 600,000 Ukrainians that were killed in the war over there. You've got an insane government that's sending billions of dollars into this one of the most corrupt nations on the planet. You've got COVID. Look at what happened there. You talk about negativity and these things possessing the planet. I have never seen it more rampant than during this COVID crap that they dreamed up. You know, that was the most evil thing that I've ever seen uh, happen to an entire population. As a matter of fact, it happened to the entire world. They had planned that out well ahead of time.
Yeah, the scamdemic.
Yeah,
But
it was
we
a
started getting some.
bioweapon.
I agree. I agree. Because I had it. I didn't think it was real. Like I'll tell you what. Like I was dating a girl at the time, and we were kind of like messing around a lot. And like I guess when you're swapping spit, you're gonna get something. And she texted me that we didn't live together. She texted me the one morning, and she's like, "Hey, I just tested for COVID," and I was like, "Oh, are you serious?" I was like, "You have it?" And she's like, "Yeah." She's like, "You might want to get tested." And I tested myself, and we both had it. I used a lot of natural stuff, but I remember it just felt like a really bad flu. It felt like a really, really bad flu, like real energy draining, real I don't know how to explain. What I mean, like it was bad on my lungs. It was. I remember that, but it definitely I could definitely see it being a bioweapon for sure. We got some really good questions coming in here. I'm gonna give some of these. Uh, okay, here we go. I'll put them up on the screen so you can see them. This is from E. He says, "Can these entities affect regular people temporarily, and could this explain the increase in whole families being wiped out by a family member and random violent in daylight?"
Yeah, yep. They affect us all, especially when you get mad and you go off. You know, that's them in action. Um, and you look at a lot of these murders, these mass killings. The guy's mentally ill. A lot of these guys were hearing voices, and they'll tell the judge, they'll tell the court, "Well, the voices told me to do it." They don't believe it. So they go, "Okay, you're mentally ill," and they lock them away along with their voices. The prison was full of, when they closed down the state hospitals all over the country, starting with Proposition 13 in California because they were too expensive. They said, "Okay, we're going to set up mental health centers for these people to go. It's better for them to be in a normal environment than it is in a state hospital." They released them onto the streets, and they couldn't support themselves. They couldn't hold a job. So what are they going to do? They're going to rob and steal to survive, and then they end up in prison. And in prison, it costs a whole lot more to keep a person in prison than it does in a state hospital. A lot more. So they shot themselves in the foot.
It's
So yeah,
interesting.
the entire families are being wiped out by a family member who is schizophrenic, and the voices are telling them to attack the family.
Wow.
These
Um,
people can be extremely dangerous.
this one's from Kriya Vine. She says, "Question: How can someone get this energetic therapy, please? I know someone who desperately needs it."
Well, they can go to a website, www.causism, CAUSISM Institute, INSTITUTE.com.
I'm gonna
Uh,
CAUSISM cause CAUSISM Institute. Is that right?
.com. All one word, no spaces. Or they
I'm gonna put it in the chat. Causism. I think I have that right. Hold on, I'm gonna put it in the chat, and then I'll put it up on the screen so people can see it. Like, um, you know, because for people that might see this later, they might not see the chat. So I'll put it up on the screen so people can get a good idea of what it is. Yeah.
Or they can go to my website at jerrymarzinsky.com, but I'm backed up to the last week of June right now. But if they're willing to wait, I can put them on the appointment list.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, let me get here. This is from Freedom is Essential. Freedom is Essential says, can you ask Jerry what he has noticed between those with severe borderline traits who want to harm others when in psychosis and those with schizophrenia whom are self-harming?
Well, borderline is basically what we considered borderline is people who were very unlikable. They're very self-centered. Very wrapped up in themselves and only their concerns. They're not necessarily schizophrenic or psychotic. They're just obnoxious, I guess you would say. Schizophrenics, the borderline people, they tend, if they harm themselves, it's more superficial. It might be, cutting, but not serious type stuff. Where schizophrenics will, they'll make some serious suicide attempts on themselves, or they may seriously harm other people. Keep in mind, those voices don't like anybody who's trying to help the schizophrenic. They consider them enemies.
This Raya made a good point. She says, what about vicious thoughts in kids? Where are our spirit guides to protect us from the darkness? I think she was talking to someone in the chat about that, but like, that's a good point. Like, because a lot of us believe in spirit guides, but like the spirit guides sometimes aren't there to protect the kids who have vicious thoughts that they go in and gun down a school or something like that. I mean, it's the same thing, right? They're going through schizophrenic thoughts, probably entity attachment, would you say?
Well, they don't need to be schizophrenic to do that, but those thoughts are coming in from the dark side. Okay. So you have abused kids. So what I've seen in my career is people who were severely physically, sexually, or emotionally abused are much more open to attacks from these entities. These entities are like sharks swimming in the ocean. They smell blood. They go after the weakest members, people who are physically, sexually, and emotionally abused badly. They'll jump in there and they'll just start putting negative thoughts into their heads that they're amenable to start with. They don't attack. They don't viciously attack people who are very spiritual. They can't stand church. They can't stand praying. Now, there are positive guides. There are they call guardian angels that are watching over everybody. Everybody has at least two of them, but they can't help you unless you ask. They can't barge in there like these negative entities and just kind of take over, and they have to be asked.
It makes me wonder about the makeup of this reality. You know what I mean? It really makes me wonder what's going on. Like, about the, like I really have, I really, that's why I do this show. Cause I really makes me wonder, like, like if we have good guides, like they should be able to interfere just like the negative ones. It seems like the negative ones have more power for whatever reason. You know
No,
what
they
I
don't have.
mean?
Yeah, they don't have more power. Now, the positive ones will interfere when you're on the verge of death. I've seen it a million times in the emergency room with people who attempted to kill themselves, but somehow failed. Something interfered. It was very clear. There was this one lady. Everything went wrong with her life. She lost her job. She was divorced. She was about to get kicked out of her apartment. Everything went wrong. So she decided she was going to go out to a railroad track and wait there for a train to come by, and then she was going to drive her car in front of the train. She couldn't bring herself to shoot herself or do anything like that. So she was sitting there telling her sister goodbye over the phone. She was drugged up and drunk, and she saw the train coming. She hung up the phone, and as the train approached, she drove her car in front of the train. The train hit the car, threw it into another track, and another train came by and hit her again and threw her like 50 yards off the track.
Oh my God.
The car was like a crumpled tin can. They could not get her out. They had to cut her out.
They
So
probably used the jaws of life, right? I know they use
probably,
the jaws of life in
you
it.
know. So here I'm sitting. I'm working in the emergency room doing psych crisis, and in she comes, and I'm reading the the notes, and the only thing she had was a black eye. I couldn't friggin' believe it. Hit by two trains and only having a black eye. So I asked her, I said, what were you thinking after you came to when that second train hit you? She said, I was furious. I didn't want to be alive. I didn't want to be here. I was absolutely furious. And um, I said, well, anything happen after that? She said, yeah. She said, I heard a voice saying, everything's going to be okay. And she said she felt this absolute feeling of peace, like everything was fine. You know? And after that, she knew everything was going to be fine. And, after talking to her and doing a suicide evaluation on her, I didn't feel she was suicidal anymore. So, I wrote it up. I said, I don't think she's going to harm herself anymore. I think she's done. And I didn't think psychiatry, who had to approve that before release, I didn't think they were going to approve it. They let her out. It was thing after thing after thing like that. One guy had a 357 Magnum, put it to his head, all the cylinders were loaded. Click, put it at the ground, bang, put it to his head again, click, put it at the ground again, bang. He goes, okay, I got it. He threw the gun away. I mean, there was story after story after story like that where these people should have been dead, but something interfered. Okay?
Do you feel like that we're that like this is like a school that like we're here to learn lessons and stuff, and maybe that's why there's so much duality here?
Yeah, you're here to learn, but yeah, you you need to take responsibility for the thoughts that are coming into your head. Okay, they don't come in from you. You're the one who chooses them. You're the one who chooses to act on them. You're the one who chooses to entertain them. Okay, they're coming in from the dark side. They're coming in from the light. Now the positive entities, they don't speak in words. They speak through feeling, intuition, and serendipity, like stuff that happens to you. Like you may have may be thinking about a particular problem, and then a car drives in front of you with a bumper sticker that solves that problem, or something comes in and just all of a sudden you have a solution. You know, but Manuel Swedenborg, a Christian mystic who lived some 300 years ago, he said, "No thoughts belong to you. You're just the receiver." So your brain is like a radio receiver. Okay, there's no you turn on the radio and you hear people, but those people aren't in that radio. So those thoughts that you hear, although they appear to be in your mind, in your head, they don't come from there. They come from outside of you, from entities outside of you. So positive entities are they can, the positive thoughts come from positive entities that are vibrating at your frequency. The negative ones are coming from negative entities. You are the chooser. You choose which ones you're going to attend to, which ones you're going to accept. That's your responsibility. But the huge danger with these negative ones is that people believe that because they hear these thoughts in their head, that those thoughts are theirs, that they belong to them. And that's what these negative entities play off of. They will insert negative thoughts into the person's thought stream, and they sound just like all the other thoughts that come through your head. There's not anything like, we are the negative entities or anything like that. They sound just like all your other thoughts. Only their intent is very different. Their content is negative. It's very different. So virtually every negative thought about yourself or anybody else comes from the negative side. I think you misspelled causism also on your screen. Let me check it. See if you have it spelt right.
I'll type it in just. I'll type it in again because it's way up in the chat. I'll have to type it in again. It's CAUSISM, right?
Right.
Um, institution, institution or
Institute.
institute.com.
Dot, dot com.
Causisminstitute.com. I'll
And the
put.
reason they call it causism is because it gets to the cause of psychological problems. It's not like psychology or psychiatry that just treat the symptoms, or you just beat a dead horse to death, repeating the same thing over and over again. This energetic therapy actually gets rid of psychological problems, and it does it quick, and they don't come back.
Wow,
It's
that's
almost
amazing.
magic. I've never seen anything like it.
That's interesting. That's interesting. And are they doing like entity removals too, or they just work with the mental? Is it?
Well, they do both. It's um, if if they can't get rid of the entity, they can get rid of the trauma that the entity is feeding on. So they can help the schizophrenic either way. There's a number. There's also something that they work with called a negative identity. It's like a subconscious program that is programmed into your mind during a trauma. Right? It's subconscious because there's an awful feeling that comes up when you experience a trauma, and that feeling just stays there; it won't go away. So your ego takes it and it buries it in the subconscious mind and it locks it down, but it's buried alive. Okay? So it's affecting you for the rest of your life, but you're not aware of it. It affects your decisions. It affects your relationships. It affects how you behave. Uh, it affects everything. It's like a computer virus affecting your computer, but you don't see it. Okay? This
That's
MACE energy system will go in there and it will get rid of that trauma. It neutralizes the trauma. So after they're done, you ask the person, how do you feel about that trauma now? And they go, okay, it happened. I remember it, but it doesn't have any emotional charge to it. It's gone. It doesn't affect the person anymore.
We have one. I'll do one more question. This is from Lauren Gillette. She says, "Is the causism method similar to the emotion code method? Do you know the emotion code? I'm not familiar with that."
I'm not real familiar with it either. I don't know.
Yeah, that's interesting. One other. I was seeing what other questions are. Uh, but this world, she said, this Jehovah Barbara's daughter is Barbara. Her name goes, but she goes by. She says maybe Jerry should explain what schizophrenia is. There's a lot of misinformation out there. I was hesitant about bringing this up because you kind of explained it. It's like entity attachments, basically, right? Would you
Well,
say your
that
theory is that it's all entity attachments, or do you believe there's mental health problems too?
well the entities cause mental health problems. Okay. Now, what I want to do is specify what I'm talking about is paranoid schizophrenia. Okay, there's a bunch of different kinds of schizophrenia. The entities are attached to the paranoid schizophrenia, this paranoid schizophrenics. So they don't call them paranoid for nothing. And the entities make them paranoid. Okay. There is a lot of information, misinformation out there, and it's put out by the psychiatric mafia and big pharma. They want you to believe that these voices are hallucinations. If they're running patterns, they can't be hallucinations. They only treat symptoms. They don't treat the cause. They don't even know what the cause of schizophrenia is. They it was Eli Lilly that came out with this biochemical imbalance lie back in the 70s when they came out with Prozac. They didn't know why those medications worked. So they had to come up with some reason why their medications work. So they fabricated this complete lie. They didn't have any research to back it. They just spouted it out there. Oh yeah, it's a chemical imbalance in the brain. But you look at what psychiatrists do. Those of you who go to psychiatrists, they'll tell you it's a chemical imbalance in your brain. Have you ever seen them give you any lab work? any X-ray, any EKG, any EEG, any kind of objective test to measure what chemicals in the brain are out of balance or by how much? No, you didn't, because they don't have such a test. It does not exist. They don't even know what the chemical balance of the brain should be. It was a complete fabrication, along with their DSM. That dictionary of statistical um, uh,
Medicine.
diagnoses,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know, it completely made up. It's a work of fiction. All those diagnoses in that diagnostic classification manual are all made up by psychiatry. They've taken segments of human behavior and pathologized them. There's not a single test for any one of the almost 300 of them in the DSM right now. There's no there's no EEG, EKG. There's no objective test for any of them. None. They're all made up by a group of psychiatrists, 2/3 of which are associated with big pharma. You know, they I've heard it was similar to their meetings were similar to a tobacco auction, where a guy comes in, he goes, "Hey, I got a new psychiatric diagnosis. Um, it's this," and they spout it out, with all the symptoms, and they sit there and go, well, can the big pharma make some kind of um, medication to treat the symptoms of this thing? You know, they've gone nuts with this thing. Back in 1952, there were 106 psychiatric disorders. In 1980, there were 256 psychiatric disorders. The DSM-5 right now has 297 psychiatric disorders, and they're fabricating more all the time. Okay.
This is a good one. This I just saw this one. This one's from Seeker. He says, "Do these entities also affect people with other mental illnesses like narcissistic or borderline personality disorder?"
Well, again, every negative thought that comes into your mind is put in from the dark side.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
a good
Now
point.
they have a lot more control over the schizophrenics. So, in normal people, normal people have these negative thoughts too. I don't know how many times I've talked to people. They said I was standing on a bridge over this big river, hundreds of feet in the air, and I had this thought to jump. Or I was driving my car one night and I had this thought to drive into oncoming traffic, or something like that. These thoughts appear out of nowhere. The person would never act on them, and they're shocked that they even had them. There was one time out in here, Arizona. Uh, we don't. Most of us don't have lawns. We just cut the cactus down to keep the cactus from overgrowing the place. So I was out in the backyard once, cutting the cactus back with a machete, and I have a beautiful Alaskan pure white husky, and she was running around back there. She wasn't causing any trouble. She run by me, and here's this thought comes into my head, said, "Cut her head off." I was completely shocked. It was like, I knew that wasn't me. I would never do anything like that. I was shocked that a thought like that even appeared in my mind, and it upset me. That was them. They hit us all. They hit narcissists, they hit borderlines, they hit everybody with mental illnesses. Every negative thought that comes into your head belongs to them. It comes
That
from
makes
them.
sense. That makes sense. Yeah. So
But
and
they have much more control over schizophrenics or paranoid schizophrenics.
This is great because I think this is going to be really good for people who are currently experiencing mental illness or people who are experiencing isolation. Because when they hear this, they'll know, number one, that they're not alone. They're involved in this community of like people who are truth seekers. But then also on top of that, now they know that the source of their problems isn't them. So, because a lot of times a mental illness can make a person feel down. They're like, "Oh, I'm depressed," or "I'm paranoid all the time." That, and they know that that's not them. They know that they have a light inside them, but
Right.
maybe they just didn't know what was causing it. You know what I mean? So I
Yeah,
think it's important to
exactly
have
right.
these.
That's exactly right. I got an email from one guy who was hearing voices, and he said, "Thank you. That's all I needed to know, was that the voices weren't me." He said, "I'll handle it from here." Just like that. the schizophrenics need to understand that those voices that they're hearing are not them. They don't come from them. They don't belong to them. These are negative entities that want to generate negative emotional energy to suck their energy level. Now, these voices do not like anybody telling the schizophrenic that they are not their thoughts. And when I was working in the prison, a lot of the prisoners who were hearing voices were just as interested in finding out what they were as I was. And they would ask the voices, who are you? What are you? Where do you come from? And what do you think the voices told them?
Nothing. They didn't tell them anything.
They told them, we are you. They wanted them to believe that those thoughts that the voices were putting into their heads belonged to them.
And I know why. Because that makes the person feel more fucked up, right?
Yep.
It makes the person lose their will, because they're like, oh, I'm totally fucked up. How can I go on? How can I live? How can I live a normal life because I'm such a piece of shit? But it's not that. It's not that at all.
Right. Then they go to a psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist drugs them up, and then they feel like a zombie piece of shit. It doesn't get rid of the voices. It just weakens them. Wow. It doesn't cure anything. Neither do those antidepressants. They don't cure anything.
This has been amazing. This has been amazing. Do you want to? Do you have any final thoughts, Jerry, before we finish up for tonight?
Well, if you want to learn more about this stuff, you can get our book. Now, Sherry Sweeney helped me write this. She's probably one of the most spiritual people I know. She heard voices when she was a young woman. And we wrote this together because we felt people needed to know what these voices were, how they operated, and that they weren't the thoughts that came into the person's brain, that these things were actual entities. And this is how we came to the conclusion that they were entities, that they weren't hallucinations as the psychiatric mafia said they were.
Yeah, that's amazing. And your website's, can you tell them your website?
It's jerrymarzinsky.com.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's awesome. And thank you.
We have hundreds of interviews there. We got testimonials. We've got blog stuff that'll help people. There's a lot of information there about schizophrenia.
That's awesome. And someone wanted to know, what was the title of the book again?
It's An Amazing Journey into the Psychotic Mind.
So it's an amazing journey into the psychotic, and that the link's in the description, guys. I also put the link in the description. So if you want to purchase the book, just go into the description and the link is there, and you can purchase the book right from the link. So it's easy to find for you guys. It's just in the video description. Well, thank you, Jerry. And I just want to say on my end, guys, like, if you can try to show support for the podcast. I try to bring you guys amazing guests every day. Links are in the description, and that's all I got for tonight. And thank you so much, Jerry. And this was an amazing interview. This was really good. So thank you for taking your time to speak to us, and we really appreciate it.
Well, you're more than welcome. Without you guys, I'd be a voice screaming out in the wilderness.
All right. Well, thank you. Have a good night, and take care, everybody. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Thanks, Jerry.